Good afternoon, councillors. As this is a special meeting and not the usual full council, I've dispensed with my chaplain for today, so we'll carry on with the meeting. Thank you. I don't have the right word, but there we are. Not quite the right word. Get this chair up higher.
Sorry, thanks.
Oh, that's the back. This one's the one to get it up higher, isn't it? I know he's up to no good in Abergavenny.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, right. Now then. We'll have a drink first. Right. Good afternoon. Right, any apologies for absence, please? Councillor Fox?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can I give apologies for Brian Strong, who's recovering from his operation, Paul Jordan, who's stuck travelling back from Edinburgh after a flight cancelled, Peter Clark, Ruth Edwards, and I'm sure there's one other.
David Dovey.
David Dovey, he's not well. Yeah, David.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Petrina.
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Kevin Williams, Councillor David Evans, and Councillor Tony East, unless he's slightly late, I think.
Thank you very much. We're doing the... Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Howarth and Councillor Blakeborough.
Thank you very much. We're going to do 3 and 4 in reverse order because the Chief Executive has been held up at another meeting. So I'll ask Councillor Bob Greenland. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten. Apologies. Councillor Peter Fox wishes to make a statement first.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, I wanted to bring you up to speed because I know we all share the same concern about the proposed redesign of older adult mental services in Chepstow, and I know there's some real concerns there. Sorry. Yeah.
I just declare an interest in that, Chair, and I'll leave the room. I think it's personal and prejudicial.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. As members will know, there's been a lot of concern raised by this, certainly raised by many local members, and quite rightly we're really quite concerned, and there's been a lengthy consultation out, as you know, and a lot of people have contributed very positively and forcefully from Monmouthshire to that consultation process. We understand that the Nottingham Bevan Health Board will be meeting on Wednesday the 21st. The papers for that meeting are on the public website. They are in the public domain, and members will be concerned to read the recommendations there to close St Pierre ward in the Chepstow Hospital, which concerns all of us, especially those of us who have been very close, certainly Councillor Penny Jones, but local members especially, I know. And I wanted to read out, I had a letter a couple of days ago from Judith Paget, the Chief Executive of the Nottingham Bevan Health Board, and she emailed all leaders, directors of social services, assembly members and members of Parliament. Very sadly, she didn't capture all of relevant cabinet members. So we received this letter, and I thought it would be best, Chairman, to read it out so everybody knows where we are and what we're doing further on this. And so, dear colleague, the proposed redesign of older adult mental health services. I'm writing to update you on the redesign of older adult mental health services within the Nottingham Bevan University Health Board. As you will be aware, following an initial period of engagement with stakeholders, a formal public and staff consultation was carried out between November 2017 and January 2018 regarding the potential redesign of older adult mental health services. Feedback from the consultation has now been analysed and considered, and I can confirm that a paper will be presented to our board meeting on Wednesday the 21st of March 2018. The paper can be found on the Health Board's website today, should you wish to access it. The paper seeks board approval to progress the transformation of specialist services for older people with a mental health difficulty in Gwent. The key recommendations within the paper are outlined below. to approve an immediate investment plan in older adult mental health community services. If supported, this will, 1, enable a strengthening of our memory assessment services. 2, enhance the support we provide to those individuals within care homes. 3, improve access for older people to evidence-based psychological therapies. And 4, to improve support for older people with a functional mental health difficulty and their families who experience an acute crisis out of hours. To consolidate the number of specialist inpatient units for older adults with mental health needs to 4 across the health board area and developing these units into centres of excellence. This would mean the closure of St Pierre ward within Chepstow Community Hospital, and to support immediate actions being put in place to safely manage the closure of St Pierre ward due to concerns regarding the ability of the health board to safely staff the ward from the 14th of April 2018. To note the ongoing work being undertaken jointly with Monmouthshire County Council and other partners to develop an integrated health and social care hub for the South Monmouthshire population. To note the concerns expressed throughout the public consultation regarding transport and car parking and the ongoing actions being taken to develop deliverable service solutions to these difficult situations. And to note the recent publication of the Welsh Government's Strategic Action Plan for Dementia and the need for the Health Board to continue to work with partners to further deliver integrated care and support for people with dementia and their carers. I will write to you again following the meeting to inform you of the decision made by the board. However, in the meantime, if you have any queries, please do not hesitate to contact me. Obviously, we were very concerned. Penny and myself and Claire met this morning to review the letter and obviously look through that report as well, and disappointed that many of the things that we've raised through consultation and that members of MAVE have not been recognised within the report and not within the recommendations. Indeed, one of the recommendations says, despite all of the concerns raised by Monmouthshire residents, and they are significant, they need to move ahead with this position, which we find unacceptable. I know the Chief Executive, who's just joined us at the back, Chief Executive has also contacted directly Judith Paget to share our concerns. And we will be drafting a very strong letter to Anne Lloyd, the Chair of the Health Board, this afternoon, which will be going in my name we'll be asking Mrs. Lloyd to make sure that's presented to all Health Board members at their meeting prior to them making a decision. As soon as I've got that letter completed, I will also circulate it to all of you so you know what we've said. We're dead against this, as I know local members are as well. I don't think there's any political issues in this one. This is a sad state of affairs when something so important to Monmouthshire and certainly to the south of the county where a service is being removed yet again from the area. And I don't think the fact that there's some work going on with us around other options there, it takes away anything from the fact that we do not want this service to go. We hope the board will see some sense and pay cognizance to the very lengthy consultation responses that came in from Monmouthshire residents, local members and others. So, Chairman, that was just by way of an update, just to share with members that there will be a strong letter going off in the very near future, certainly before the board meet, and we will circulate that to all members.
Councillor Armand-Watts.
Yes, Chair. I don't know where to start with this, really. I thank Peter for obviously keeping us updated, but, after seeing the information, I had the Argus reporter phone me to tell me that this was going to take place. I can't pretend I was anything other than angry and then upset and then very upset, and it's a hard thing to live with. I am living it. I wonder what the purpose of the consultation was. I mean, I've seen mock consultations before, but this takes the biscuit. Time and time again, whether it's Lisa, whether it's Peter, whether it's Paul, whether it's my own members, have turned up in public meetings, and you can feel the ferocity, the anxiety, the well-articulated arguments by members of the public and staff. Some of them are on the NHS contract, some of them not on the NHS contracts, who are completely opposed to it. So they simply kind of went through a process of mock consultation and decided what they wanted to do right from the beginning. It's an insult really to the people of Monmouthshire, but it's also detrimental, fundamentally detrimental to people who are suffering with adult mental health, particularly those that have got dementia. So I look forward to receiving a letter. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Giles Howard.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Watts has made the point I wish to, really. And I've followed the arguments with interest the case the community and local authority have put forward, and those who depend on the service. I saw the article with Armand and Pauline, the article with Paul, and it made me wonder, really, just what is it that an Ayr and Bevan Health Board wanted to hear during the consultation that would have made them change their mind, how much suffering and inconvenience was required before they'd go the other way. And I just came up with the same view, that nothing could have been said during this consultation that would have given us the answer that we wanted, and I think it was a sham.
Councillor Louise Brown, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I've written in response to the consultation to say how opposed I am to the idea of Saint-Pierre Dementia Ward being closed. The Health Board, in their report to the on Wednesday, basically failed to reconsider all the options, one of which is option 1, which is basically to do nothing. That would be the fairer option, because it would actually mean that there was a fair geographical spread of inpatient care. The recommendation basically means that in the north, south and west of the Health Board area there will be inpatient care, but in the east of the area there won't be any inpatient care at all. And how can that be actually fair? And I do think it will create a lot of misery for the 32 families per year, patients per year, that are going to be affected by this particular decision. Also, it hasn't been thought through properly. It's an ill thought out and not worked out plan, because basically the idea is that there's going to be 15 patient beds lost in Chepstow, and all of the Monmouthshire patients are supposed to then go to St Willis in Newport. But the 14 beds in Newport are not going to be increased. So since the reports have said before that there's a high occupancy rate in these hospitals, then it'll mean that Chepstow residents will end up going to either Ystrid or basically going to Ebbw Vale. Now, looking at that, it would be easier for somebody to travel by train to Birmingham New Street from Chepstow than it would be to travel by train to Ystrid or to Ebbw Vale. It's approximately 2 hours journey time there, including the walking distance. So they are expecting patients and their families to do a 4-hour trip to go and see their relatives who are in this situation. And it is unrealistic, and it hasn't been thought about properly. There is also no travel plans worked out at all. But even if there was, the extra stress and strain of putting relatives and carers through this awful journey is unrealistic and unfair. And I think that they should keep the ward open, even if it has to be supported by seconded nurses and bank staff, because there is apparently going to be more nurses trained within the next 3 or 4 years. So this is a long-term wrong decision to cover a short-term staffing issue. And I don't think it's the right decision at all. And I very much hope that the board will reject it and actually look at the previous papers for September and go for option 1, which is a much fairer option. Thank you.
Councillor Bob Greenman, followed by Councillor Penny Jones.
Chair, I concur with all the remarks that have been made here this afternoon. I just want to query one thing. I know that Councillor Frances Taylor has declared an interest and left the room because she is a member of the Health Board and she will be part of the decision-making process. I understand, therefore, why she would not want to comment on anything that is said. But I would have thought it appropriate that she was actually in this room, in this chamber, to hear the views of of members of this council. After all, if it was a planning matter, a member of the planning committee would quite accept people coming and making representations to them, putting their point of view. Why is this any different, and why are we not being given the opportunity for Councillor Taylor to know the views, and the very strong views, of this council chamber? Now, I know that it's up to her what she does, but I am disappointed that she isn't in the chamber to hear these views this afternoon.
Perhaps, Chairman, can I make some comments on that, please, just to explain to members as best I can. Councillor Greenland has stolen my thunder a bit in that it is very much Councillor Taylor's decision. The difference with the appointment or Councillor Taylor's appointment on the board is that it isn't an appointment by the council. She's there at her own behest, if you like, and that does make a difference to the code in that if she was a council appointment, then it would just be a personal interest. But bearing in mind it's an independent appointment, she's done it herself, that does call into question whether or not it does become a prejudicial interest, and therefore she's decided it is. Just one final observation, Councillor Greenland. This, of course, is recorded, this meeting, and Councillor Taylor can, at her own leisure, if you like, look at the comments that have been made here this afternoon. I hope that's of assistance.
Councillor Penny-Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also reiterate all the comments that have been made. This report does not consider the needs of Monmouthshire, and that is perhaps the most disappointing aspect of all. And it also leaves too many questions unanswered. When and how? To close a ward before any of the transport problems are sorted out, to say before the staffing has been reorganised, just seems absolute madness. For instance, suggestions are cognitive stimulation therapy will be extended. Well, how? Nothing is said about that. Complete review of MAS services to reduce variation in access. When? Review and refocus dementia coordinator. When? There are no details, and yet they're tantamount to closing the ward as soon as they can without anything being in place. It just seems, as I said before, madness. The other thing I'd like to point out is that this isn't aligned in any way with the parliamentary review, which the Welsh Government is leading, and which, you know, to all intents and purposes is a great step forward. So I don't understand how one is going forward and the other step is going backwards, all in the name of Welsh Government. For instance, among the many recommendations from the parliamentary review is this, that it will provide seamless services centred around the citizen. Also, it will have care and support organised around the individual or family as close to home as possible. Well, I don't think that this report addresses those issues. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Fox?
No, Chair.
Just-
Madam Chairman, it was only
just
to
for
update members.
information.
I'll circulate the letter as
Yeah.
soon as we've drafted it.
Now that the Chief Executive has come back, do you want to keep to it or leave it as reversed? Carry on as we planned. Right, the next item we're taking is the Local Development Plan, and I ask Councillor Bob Greenland to introduce it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I'm sure that members will be well aware of the purpose of the Local Development Plan. It is to set the way that we use our land in Monmouthshire over the period of the plan. Our existing plan is due to move on until 2021. But we are required every 4 years to undertake a full review of the plan. And that would mean that, in any case, we would be undertaking a review in February 2018, or starting that review. In fact, we began a review in November of last year with a report and going out to consultation to stakeholders. And what we're being asked this afternoon is 4 different things. First of all, officers have now produced a report based on the views of the stakeholders that responded to the invitation, and they have reduced that report, and we are being asked to endorse that for onward going to the sorry, I've lost my place anyway, never mind. Onward to the Welsh Government. But the heart of what we're doing this afternoon is actually to look at the future of our existing LDP. We know that there are shortages in the housing developments that are coming forward under the existing LDP. We are not producing the number of houses that we anticipated, and that is obviously causing problems, and not least because of now the added burden, well, not burden, the added pressure that we have in the south of the county through the abolition of the fares for the Severn Bridge. We have 2 options. Well, I suppose we have 3 options, actually, of what we could do now. We could do nothing, but to do nothing would leave us exposed to the developers who could, I've no doubt through appeals, manage to get housing in areas of the county that we would not like them to be. We could go for a short-term review of the LDP, which would allow us to address the problems that we have with housing, for instance, but not to reduce look at the strategy of the LDP. We could do that, but that would undoubtedly put us under pressure of new housing estates. Or we could go for a full review of the LDP. If we went for a short-term review, it would have to be for a period of 10 years, so we would be taking it forward to 2030 or thereabouts. And if we did that, is our strategy that we set all those years ago for the current LDP, is that strategy still the right strategy as we move forward? I would suggest that it isn't. Added to that, we know that the Welsh Government do not favour a short-term review. For those reasons, and I'm sure many others, we have decided that the best option is to go for a full LDP, new LDP process now. That means that would take us to around about 2033 by the time we have adopted that and it has the period to run. Officers believe, and I think they're absolutely right, that this is the right process, and therefore the recommendation comes that we should start a new LDP process now. We're also being asked to agree to the stakeholder consultation that is part of this process, and I think, well, I can't remember what else it says. Thank you. The stakeholder process and the community involvement process going forward. So we're being asked to do that as well today. And then the final thing, there is an in-between plan which is being proposed, and that is a spatial development plan. It sits in between national policy and our local policy. And it is proposed that a process be joined in with other councils in South East Wales to agree a spatial development plan moving forward. Now, all leaders of councils in the South East have agreed that they think this is the right thing to do, but it is a council decision that we undertake the spatial development plan process, and so we're asking council to endorse the views that were put in the letter by the leader to the Welsh Government Minister. So those are the 4 areas. We have with us Mark Hand and Rachel Lewis, who know far more about this than I do, and so they are available for questions from members as well, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Do you wish to come in, Mark, or shall I bring the members in first?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Greenland's covered the main points, so I'm happy if a member's happy to go to questions.
You. Councillor Bertuni.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Labour Group will be supporting the full review, absolutely, and we support many of the things the Cabinet member has just said. But let's be clear also why we're here and why this group supports the full review is the miserable failure of this council to deliver the adequate housing of the county's needs. If you go on the review report, Appendix 1A and point 2.1.3, if you look at the calculations there, we've only completed 34% of housing completions as predicted by the plan since 2014. On affordable housing, we've only completed 33% after 4 years of the predicted affordable housing completions. So only a third on either have we managed to achieve. There's a crisis, a housing crisis in Monmouthshire, and this council has failed in every conceivable way to deliver the adequate housing for people on modest incomes and people who are struggling. And so we desperately need a full review to remedy this bad failure from this council. They should have listened to Labour Group at the adoption of the LDP, where we demanded more housing targets and more affordable housing. The leader shakes his head, but it's true, it's on record. We announced we should push for more housing. We were told this is adequate, this is enough. We don't need any more. This should suffice. And turns out it doesn't in any conceivable way. So we support the full review for that reason. And but I have a technical question as well for the Cabinet member and for the relevant officers in relation to the review being sent to the Welsh Government. And it's on housing projections and on population growth. So any of the estimates discussed of the sense of population figures, that's 2008, 2011, which is based on the census, and the mid-year estimates based on 2014, show varying levels of growth, but growth nonetheless in housing projections, and always revision upwards of baseline figures of population in Monmouthshire. And I noticed that some of the comments from some people like Bovis Homes talk about the review that we're going to send says, actually we need to review this as well because of the toll reduction and then subsequent removal end of this year because of the effect on house prices, which of course is absolutely right, it has an uplift in house prices, but that we haven't taken into account in that review the population growth. So the best population growth figures we have are from 2014. We're in 2018. Okay, in 2014 we didn't know the tolls were going to be got rid of, and now we do know. So our review doesn't take into account 4 years down the line, doesn't take into account growth figures of a toll removal. It takes into account of house price increase, but doesn't take into account house population growth due to removal, which is significant from people who would know. So Bovis Homes said you need to take this into account because basically a lot of people from Bristol and surrounding areas would want to move into Monmouthshire. Why not? It's a desirable area, particularly in towns like Monmouth and Chepstow and Caldecott. So why haven't we put that in the review? Could you explain to me why?
Councillor Armand. Oh, sorry. Do you want to answer?
Can I just come back and then perhaps I can ask Mark Hand or Rachel to come in. Just putting this right, there was nothing wrong with the level of housing proposed in the current LDP. The problem was that those housing sites, particularly the strategic housing sites, have not come forward in the way that we anticipated coming forward. Now, there's a whole load of reasons why that is the case, but to actually blame the administration for things like developers deciding not to bring them forward at the time. There are issues over a couple of the sites where we've chosen to perhaps deal with them in a better way than simply selling it on to a developer. But to blame this on the inadequacy of the projections in the previous plan is, I think he would, under other circumstances, agree, utter nonsense. I'm sure Mark would have something to say.
Well, Chair, if I may.
Councillor
On the
Watts.
theme of utter nonsense, I remember the term ago when we had Bob Hayward, who I grew to like, actually, a Conservative Party member and always a Conservative, who left the Conservative group because he claimed he was being bullied and whipped. He said it publicly, whipped. It was in the Argus. I remember the Argus covering it in some depth. 2 occasions, so he was being whipped by the Conservative Party into agreeing to the LDP. And he was right. He was being bullied and he was being whipped, and eventually he left the Conservative Party. And we saw a different side of him, which was much more human and much more acceptable. But the point is, Chair, that the LDP is in crisis. It was in crisis from the beginning. It was ill thought out. I mean, the 5 key sites, you've not delivered on one affordable house within those 5 key sites. So I want to move that. We could have a row about this all afternoon, but it's pointless. Let's move on and let's try to be kind of progressive. You've got to think about the consultation. Now, Paul and I sat in Economy and Development the other day, and we agreed that wider consultation is necessary, and that should include parents of every child within our schools, because those children need affordable housing. They should be involved in a decision-making process to allow those families to keep the children within the communities and within the county. So to do that, the consultation has got to be extended to the public properly this time, but also it has to kind of be communicated, and we've got to take opinions and think about other local authorities. That includes Gloucestershire. Because if you go just over to the Tuthill and Sudbury side, you'll see 3 sites there that are piggybacking on the if you like, on the side of Monmouthshire itself. So there's no amenities over there, but effectively all those people, probably another 1,000 by the time they finish, will be using Monmouthshire County Council facilities. And I think that really needs some kind of close scrutiny, really. That puts a lot of pressure on the existing infrastructure. And my final point is about the infrastructure. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde situation within the Conservative group. At the one hand, you're saying, oh, well, we need to move forward. But at the same time, you're not invested in the infrastructure, which is the schools. We've had a lengthy debate which took 2 abstentions from the Conservative Party to just basically for you to then push back the investment in Chepstow School to 2030, something like that. You cannot put houses into a community and then withdraw the services and support services and amenities within that community. It's just schizophrenic. So you need to be smarter about it this time before you'll get any kind of agreement from our side.
Mark Hand would like to speak now.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's a number of points made there. I'll just try and cover the key bits and clearly avoid the political side. In terms of the current plan, what we've tried to do in the review report is really critically self-reflect on why sites haven't come forward. There are complex and varied reasons why, but all of those sites are making progress. There's one site, Vinegar Hill, which is the weakest link, shall I say, but the other sites are all making progress to come forward. I think one of the things we've learnt is we have accepted there's perhaps an over-reliance on the strategic sites, those bigger sites. As soon as you have a site of that size, we're only really dealing with the 5 PLCs that operate in this part of Wales, and with the other economical things going on, that has limited those sites coming forward. It's not an uncommon issue for Monmouthshire, with sites not coming forward as quickly as we'd like. But one of our differences is people are certainly keen to build here. So there are those challenges going forward as well. In terms of the projections and the comments from some of those consultees like Bovis Homes, and others said it as well, we have covered in the review report other aspects that need to be looked at. So things like the tolls, things like any other aspiration. So at the moment, the plan's based on certain figures. If council were to approve today that we start work on a new plan, one of those first bits of work would be to look at options for growth. The starting point for that is the population projections, but they are just projections. So they will draw a line saying if everything carries on for the next 5 years as the last 5 years, this is what happens. we would then present you options to add in other factors. For example, economic aspiration, things to do with the tolls going down. What does that do to our housing market? What does that do to perhaps businesses coming over from that side of England, wishing to relocate into Monmouthshire? And in itself, what does that do to the housing market? So we'd factor in all of those different things. So the graphs that are shown in the review report, as important as they are a starting point. They just show what happens with our population at the moment. Our population for many decades has always been net natural decrease. So our deaths outweigh our births, outnumber our births. We have in-migration. The extent of that in-migration absolutely relates to Councillor Betruni's points going forward with those different prospects and also the other aspirations around City Deal. So those graphs are the starting point, those projections. We would then factor in options with economic growth aspirations, excuse me, and other things as well. So we talk about affordable housing. We know the challenges around our demography in Monmouthshire. How should we try and address those factors? Our ageing population and our decline around the 20 to 40 age group. So they're all options, all issues that we presented to members in due course for a proper debate with the figures behind them. So that would be part of the revision. That isn't something that you need to agree or discuss this afternoon for a conclusion. That's one of the first stages of the plan set out on the timetable. And indeed, all those other factors that have been mentioned, in particular by Councillor Watts, regarding infrastructure, would also factor into those later conclusions when we know how much growth there is. We'll be looking at where it goes and what's needed to go alongside that. Just really briefly, the other point that's been made is about engaging with children in schools and families. This was a discussion we had at the Economic and Development Select Committee. That's absolutely something that we'll be looking to do. Engage with as many different groups as we can and hear from more than just the developers or the people opposed to development. Hear from as wide a range of voices as we possibly can.
Councillor Giles Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to say very much, but after I heard some of the comments from the other side of the room, and I did wonder if Dimitri and Armand were talking out of their hats, but since they're not wearing any, I suggested talking from somewhere else. The failure of the LDP, absolute rubbish. Ultimately, it met the tests of soundness on inspection, and that's what counted. Times change, and just about every other LPA in Wales is suffering from the same issues with the LDP. Sites are undeliverable or become unviable for a variety of reasons. And the truth of the matter is, like last time, he didn't say anything about where he wanted to put the hundreds of houses. The Labour group chickened out. They didn't want to be accountable for tough decisions. Now, I'll come on to a couple of questions, if I may, and it's about the option of a short-term review or not. And the question I have is about the NDF, which the report notes we expect to appear around about 2020, and the SDP, which I think is estimated to arrive around 2023. And the point I want to make then, our new LDP has to be ready by 2021 because of the drop-dead thing. I understand that. But having two considerable policy documents coming nationally, doesn't that almost suggest that a short review, despite the Welsh Government's view that a short review will be better, in that it might allow us to address some of those issues rather than wait until 2031? And a kind of a side issue as well, what's Brecon Beacon's take on that? Are they going to be part of the SDP? Second question then, I note in paragraph 3 point something about the joint LDP that was suggested between us, Newport, Blaen and Gwent, and it kind of insinuated that if that happened, that maybe the bulk of the housing would go elsewhere. I assume Newport rather than Blaen and Gwent. And to my mind, yes, that would be preferable because I wanted to see Monmouthshire as a green and pleasant county and not the other way around. But putting that argument to one side, because I'm sure we'll have those in the months to come, doesn't that kind of present a bit of a dichotomy about soundness? Because on one hand, you're saying, well, if you're having a joint LDP, it makes sense, say, for Newport to take all the housing and for Monmouthshire not to. But if we're having our own, then we ought to have our own housing. And in one way, it's almost arguing that to go with our own LDP and to take a significant degree of housing wouldn't be sound if if we did it on a regional basis, that it would be more appropriate to go elsewhere. I just can't quite get my head around that one. I'd appreciate your comments.
Chair, I wouldn't mind answering Councillor Howard's questions first, because there were quite a few in there, if that's okay. Yeah, there's various points raised there, which are all good ones. In terms of how a new LDP for Monmouthshire might sit with the other framework above it, the National Development Framework is, as the name suggests, a framework for the entirety of Wales being drawn up by the Welsh Government. Our LDP would have to align with, well, it would have to align with anything above it. So come 2020, we'll have to ensure that what we're working on still aligns with the NDF. And then the same again with the Strategic Development Plan. If Council will agree today that we enter into that, that is likely to be adopted around about 2022, 2023, so shortly after our LDP. But upon its adoption, we have to make sure our LDP still aligns with what's above. So there are challenges there. However, if we did a short-term revision, we would still have to have a 10-year period live on the development plan, that revised development plan at the time of adoption. So it's, as Councillor Greenland suggested earlier, it will take our current plan strategy forward to about 2030. So we still have to ensure that plan aligns with the ones above. We're not in a particularly better position in that sense. Either way, what we need to do is make sure we're working, particularly on a regional basis, in an effective way, so that we not only have our plan adapt as we need to as the SDP emerges, but we can help shape the SDP, more importantly for us, from the bottom up, and ensure that the evidence and the objectives that's being based on align with the direction of travel that we're taking as an authority. Part of the reason we started talking about a review of our LDP about 18 months or so ago, and are only now bringing it to you, is because we were hoping there would be some kind of perfect alignment where we could achieve these different tiers of plans all being signed up to, coming out in a nice cohesive manner, and we'd have all of this done in time for our LDP to expire in 2021. It's become evident that clearly isn't going to happen. So we have to, in my opinion, take hold of our own destiny. We do have the challenge of our own plan expiring at the end of 2021. The other option is we could say we'll wait, we'll have the SDP finalised, and then we can work on an LDP that sits perfectly under that afterwards. But that leaves us for a period of around 7 years where we're fending off unallocated housing developments in particular, potentially not able to attract some of the economic benefits we'd like to, or employment benefits we'd like to. So our recommendations, officers, very clearly the best thing for Monmouthshire is to do our own plan and to start that now. So that's hence our recommendation to members. The short-term revision doesn't overcome those immediate challenges. In terms of the Brecon Beacons National Park, we don't yet know what their stance is regarding an SDP. There's work commenced at an officer level. Obviously, we're trying not to delay things, but also we're mindful decisions haven't yet been made by either yourselves or the other 9 or maybe 10 councils. One of the first decisions on an SDP, assuming that we are signed up to it, and council agrees it today, is what's the boundary look like? Essentially for us, I think the question is relatively simple. I would suggest it's around the Cardiff Capital Region 10 authorities, but the question is it our county council boundary, which includes part of the national park, or is it the planning authority boundaries, which excludes the national park? And largely that is a decision for the Brecon Beacons, because it affects them most in terms of their planning policy framework, how they go forwards. So at an officer level, we're starting those discussions without preempting what members may decide in due course. But I can't answer that yet in terms of where they see things going. But I think the SDP can work with them in or with them out. It can work for Monmouthshire and for the remainder of the region. And then last but not least, Chair, the question around a joint LDP. What we tried to set out in the council report is really the options. I'm not trying to suggest to you bumping growth elsewhere is a good idea. My personal opinion, it isn't a good idea. But if members think that is the best option for Monmouthshire, then the straight answer with you is you're better off with a joint plan, and you can send the development somewhere else if that's the key objective. However, if the main objective is getting a plan that we think suits our communities and our needs, then our best way of governing that, I would suggest to you, is our own plan. That doesn't say that you're signing up at this stage to levels of growth or anything of the sort, but it does give us that chance to address those challenges that face us. And I guess I'll go back, to the very beginning of the story, and what we're trying to cover at the start of the report is what's the point of the LDP? Why is it important? It is just a land use tool. That's one of the tools that you have in your armoury for delivering what you want for the future of this county. It is about what you want in terms of delivering the council's purpose of delivering sustainable, resilient communities, and it's one way of delivering that. We've talked around already the future Monmouthshire challenges around our demography, affordable housing, and some difficult decisions that come with that, and the economic aspirations, both things around the tolls and also the report that's coming after this one in terms of the business plan for Cardiff Capital Region. So it's how do we best capitalise on those benefits, avoid the harm that is unacceptable in some areas, and shape that for our future. In terms of sustaining our county, we've already started some work on economic aspects. We don't have a strong economic base. I'm delving into future areas of topic, but I've started, so I'll wind down quickly. But our mean age is 48 compared to 34, I think it is, in Cardiff. The economic base we have is primarily made up of small and medium enterprises. If we carry on with a relatively small population and an ageing population, that isn't a strong economic base to go forward with growth. It might be in due course members feel that is Monmouthshire's future, our role in a regional sense. That could work if that's what members want and our communities want. Or you might see ourselves as wanting to offer something different, tackle some of that demographic shift with the younger population moving out. We need to dig down into why they are moving out and how we can stop that. I think part of that is around affordable housing and house prices, and work through those options. So again, I did say earlier, sorry, I probably shouldn't have taken the conversation there. They are discussions for a future time, but it just tries to set a bit of context about what is the point in the LDP. It's important to me because I'm a planner and I like planning. But to you, that is what it's seeking to address, and the tool it can be for you. So we're trying not to answer the question in that report of should it be a joint plan or should it not, based on an outcome, telling you what that outcome should be. That's one for future discussion. But our advice is for the greatest say and the greatest ability to shape our own future, a plan on our own is the best tool for that. And in terms of the boring process side, getting it done as close as we can to that essential deadline of the end of December 2021, a plan on our own is the best way of doing that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have lots of new members in this room since the instigation of the last LDP, and it's absolutely vital that we get their input, so we need a full revision. We've already said that from our side of the chamber in any case. And whilst talking about that, it's interesting to go back to where we were at the start of our first LDP, which was the end of the UDP, when the inspector looked at our proposed LDP and said, sorry chums, you're 800 houses short here, so we've got a track record going back to the UDP where the inspector says you have got to put more housing sites into your LDP. And we're getting to the same situation now where we're not producing what we need to. And to a certain extent, I've got some sympathy with what Bob is saying. We are held in hock by the developers. There is absolutely no doubt about that. When it comes to sites in the LDP, we are told, right, you want 35% affordable housing, and we, as developers, are implacably going to tell you that whatever happens, we are going to get our 20% return on our money. So if anything's going to go, I'm afraid it's going to be the affordable housing, because we've got this, that and the other that we really didn't know about beforehand. So the 20% deposit profit stays, and the number of affordable houses goes down alarmingly. We can't allow that to happen. We have got, and this is happening nationally, UK-wide as well. It's about time that we had some sort of government, national government, Welsh government, restrictions on these developers, because they are the ones that are holding back housing for our children and our grandchildren. It really is as simple as that. And on the planning committee, we're told, yeah, the district valuer has looked at these plans and has to agree with the developers. But the bottom line always is the developers make their 20%. We need to really strengthen up on what we allow developers to do. And I don't think we should forget. We should forget that. So full revision with the input of loads of fresh faces over there and on our group as well, and keeping in mind the whole time that we are being held in hock basically by the developers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Alan Davies, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm one of those new councillors that was just referred to, and I just look at the information that I've accessed since I became a councillor, and what none of us can deny is that we've underperformed in terms of providing housing. Because if we look at the statistics on affordable housing, for example, Monmouthshire stands at 27% and Wales is 36%. So we're below the Welsh average, and we're also in the lower quartile when you compare it with other councils. Now, having said that, I appreciate that this is not an easy task. There are great difficulties involved, but I would have thought at some stage somebody should have been looking at those statistics and saying, well, perhaps we need to do something a little bit different. But I don't really want to talk about statistics because they are what they are. I want to talk about the future, and I want to talk about people. Because on Saturday I was contacted by a young couple in my ward who I went to visit. And I won't go into the personal details, obviously, but they were in a desperate situation as far as housing was concerned. And one thing that struck me when I went from there is that those of us that have our own home and are comfortable, we don't appreciate the stress and the troubles that people who haven't got that provision go through. And I came back away from thinking, you know, we really got to start thinking differently about these statistics. It's not so much about statistics, it's about people. And we must make provision for those people, because having a home is a fundamental human right, as we all know. And we also know that as far as the future of Monmouthshire is concerned, it is essential that we have new houses and we attract new businesses to this area. So I'm not going to get into any political arguments, because we've got what we've got. But I would hope that I approve all of the recommendations that have been made by Mark, by the way. But I would hope as a council and as individuals we can come together and really look at what can we do differently to start supplying houses for these people, because there are a lot of desperate people out there who desperately need housing, and we can't allow this to go on and on. There are things that can be done. I think the initiative in Portskewett with Mellin Homes is good. We need to look at similar things like that. And you know, I'm not an expert. My job is to look at delivery, or was my job to look at delivery, and that's what I look at. Are we delivering? We need to improve. We have to get better at it for the sake of the residents of Monmouthshire and the future of Monmouthshire. And all I would say to everybody in this room, there's a seminar next Tuesday, I believe, about social justice. And one of the fundamentals of social justice is for somebody to have a roof over their heads. So we really need not only to look at this LDP and review it, but somebody needs to have their foot on the accelerator. Because in my experience, if there's nobody behind the wheel and nobody with their foot on the accelerator, then the vehicle stays where it is. And we really need to be, this is one of our main priorities as a group. Forget your tribal affiliations. We really need to address this and get on with it and do it as soon as possible. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Louise Brown, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to say that I supported a short form revision of the LDP because basically I did give a full consultation response which can be found, I think, in Democratic Services agenda. They went through all the consultation responses. So if anybody wants to have a look at that and the reasons why I said that, obviously it's publicly available. If you look at page 75 and 76, in terms of the LDP, whether it needs to be revised via a short form or full revision, you'll see that 11 said a short form and 28 said a full revision. But I would like to know how many of that 28 were actually developers. And I think it's important that plans should not be developer-led, because I was a little concerned when I read all the responses from the developers that they were talking about more housing, but they were talking about the Severn Bridge tolls going and also about Chepstow being an area. The reason I'm keen on a short form revision is because I don't think in the Chepstow area we've got the infrastructure to support the extra housing. And I think that basically an LDP is about putting the housing in the right places where you've got the correct infrastructure. And that was my reason for arguing for a short form revision. So in order to keep Monmouthshire a green and pleasant land, then we need to be sure about the principles that we are advocating. For example, to ensure that the green wedges are maintained between towns and villages, and that that we do look at ensuring that main villages, their identity is not ruined by overdevelopment. And I think that if we just look at where the developers are saying the housing should go, I think that's quite short-sighted, because the Severn Bridge tolls will actually affect the whole of Monmouthshire. And I was interested to read how in the South Wales Argus it said that two of the most pleasant places to live were said to be Monmouth and Abergavenny. And when it was talking about Abergavenny, it said that it was 30 miles from Cardiff and 50 miles from Bristol. Now, I don't think people realise how far people do actually commute from one zone to another. I mean, I know, for example, I've got residents in Shire Newton who work in Swindon, for example. So I think in terms of the plan, we've got to make sure that we aren't developer-led and we put any new housing in the right places, make sure that it's not in the flood zone C2 areas and that we follow TAN 15. And in relation to affordable housing, I mean, obviously we do need to provide housing for our young people, and I don't think that developers should be left to get away with making a financial contribution off-site when the housing is needed to be there locally. Thank you.
Councillor Sarah Jones, please.
Thanks, Chair. Mark did actually pick up on the point I was going to make. It was just around the engagement aspect, and just to draw members' attention to the community involvement strategy. In that, I think is a very comprehensive approach to how we're going to engage with communities. And in sections the 3.16 to 3.18, it talks specifically about hard-to-reach groups, including the next generation of those individuals that are going to need housing. I think we're committed to ensuring we reach out as far and wide as possible. We'll be working with groups like Engage to Change. And just in terms of the points of other neighbouring councils, there's 12 councils listed in that document. But ultimately, we each have a responsibility as individual councillors to come forward with suggestions on how we can facilitate those discussions. If we've got groups within our own communities, if we know of hard-to-reach individuals, then I think we should be helping facilitate that process to make sure this is comprehensive as possible. So it was just to pick up on the point that Mark's made, but I think the community involvement strategy sets all that out very clearly.
Councillor Paul Pavier. Oh, sorry. Anyway, go on, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a short comment. I'm glad my other colleagues from E&D committee raised some of the issues that they raised in the committee meeting last week. It was a good meeting. And I'm certainly pleased the Head of Planning was forthcoming in his response to Councillor Watts by agreeing to wider consultation during this revision process. I think the Cabinet members are absolutely right. They were clear from the documents we received as committee members that there were a number of hard-to-reach groups in this county that we still haven't heard from. And it's important that they have a stake in shaping their future. Two other points that were very, very clear that came out of that committee. Early discussions with Welsh Government about their strategic infrastructure objectives. I think Councillor Brown has rightly raised some of the pressures that already exist in the southeast of the county, and we need to clarify what they're prepared to invest in. And I think the other important thing, just going back to Councillor Davis's point, that there should be a members' steering group, cross-party group that would help drive this forward and support the Cabinet in doing that, and hopefully will mitigate any hand-wringing or shroud-waving when it comes to the end of the process when sites are identified. And hopefully it will prevent us from not sitting 12 hours in this council when this plan comes before us for approval. Thank you.
Councillor Peter Fox, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I won't get into a political ding-dong on this. I agree with Mark. I think we do need to take control of this, and we take control of our own destiny. I'm not somebody who would like to divest myself of responsibility to enable somebody else to shape what the region might look like. We have a role to play in the region, and we need to recognise some of the things that are going to happen in the region. And I'm afraid I don't always align with the green and lovely place scenario. I love this county dearly, and we have to recognise that there's lots of young people who love this county dearly and want to continue to stay here. I don't want to see young people with real opportunities. I want to see opportunities created in the region. I don't want to see them driving to Swindon. I don't want to see them driving to Reading. I don't want to see them going to Bristol. I want them to have a good home within Monmouthshire. I want them to be able to access a great job in the region, not travelling too far, not moving out and altering the demographics within our county completely, so we turn into an ageing population. I want a county which is vibrant, something with real economic growth, somewhere we can be proud of. I think if we should not shirk away from the responsibilities of laying the foundations for the future generations, and that's absolutely fundamental for me. I have 4 children. 3 of those could still do with an affordable house, as many of the young people in this room could do. And we need to recognise the challenges which are going to present. And yes, there will be a need for more housing. There will be. And I'll be great, and I'll be looking forward to seeing people who speak strongly for in favour of housing to stand up and welcome those houses when they come, even if it's on their doorsteps, because that's the sorts of things many of us will have, housing on our doorsteps. And believe me, I know what that's like, having 600 odd houses come in my own village, which is a big challenge. That's not to say that those houses aren't needed. There are a lot of people who need housing in the county, and if we don't raise to the challenge of that, we're letting our communities down, and we're put in place here with a responsibility to shape the future going forward. That's not to say we can't learn from some of the shortcomings perhaps of the LDP process, if that's what they are going forward, or rather, there are lessons to be learned. We have to challenge, are some of our policies been standing in the way of houses coming forward? Is there a community responsibility as well? Is there an expectation of landowners that they've been expecting too much money for sites and not being able to release them? We welcome legislation which would stop land banking and people holding on and not developing those sites out. There is a huge amount of work that needs to happen, and I agree with my colleagues about infrastructure. But sometimes you've got to think about, what comes first, sort of thing. Sometimes, as I've shared with colleagues, when you get growth, that is the tipping point. which brings infrastructural change. It has to, because somewhere gets saturated. My own community is saturated, and I know what that feels like. So, you know, when you bring housing, you've got to think about infrastructure. It has to play a part in this. As with education, we were looking at new school bills back in 2000s, early 2000s. You know, a significant number of additional housing is going to require us to look heavily at additional schooling in the area. So if there is a significant lump of housing comes into the southeast of our county, not saying that's the case, but it could well sit along M4 corridor. I can't see any reason why that wouldn't be the likely case, even though I might not agree with it. That will require additional primary education places, I'm sure. All of those things are going to have to be looked at. The issues that Chepstow is facing are really severe. I know Paul and local members are really working hard to try and address some of the infrastructural needs, certainly, as Armand alluded to, a bit about, you know, what we're going to do with transport links in and out of Chepstow, you know. So does the increase of housing in the area, does that help facilitate Ring Road? Does it facilitate some opportunities? You know, let's not be closed-minded on some of the things that could be unlocked through an LDP process. It's really easy for us to revert to a NIMBY type situation. NIMBY on a more wider sense, recognising that we represent areas within the county. But we have to challenge that. It's really difficult, and the council has to raise above individual views which will get in, you know, which will stand against at times, because we have to take that higher ground and that responsibility. You know, so I don't relish moving into an LDP process. I've still got the scars all over my back from the last one. But there's a duty on us to do it. So I agree with the way forward. I don't agree with us working collaboratively on LDPs with other authorities. You'll see my letter in that regard, nor do the other 10 leaders. We absolutely believe we need to move forward. And what's disappointing is we haven't received a response yet to our letters, nor have other regional leaders who have written on behalf of the wider capital region. And that's disappointing too. So we have to move ahead. We haven't got the time to wait. And Madam Chairman, I'm happy to second Bob's recommendations.
Councillor Francis Taylor, followed by Councillor Richard John.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, planning to me is like one of the mysteries of the world. It's a bit like the Enigma machine, or, you know, once I tried to read a brief history of time, and frankly, I found it easier to understand than planning. And after 4 years on the planning committee, I'm still not sure I understand it any better. It seems to me that planning policy can be made to fit kind of any desirable outcome at that particular time, which is why I find it so frustrating, because there's very little clarity. A couple of points that I wanted to make are that it's a bit of a frustration of mine, I think, with the current LDP and moving into this process, that whilst we accept that there may be a need for more housing, we still lag behind on infrastructure. And you know, I mean, and I know this is probably not intentional, but just a couple of the comments we make, you know, are very road focused. For example, we seem to still be stuck in a mindset which is, you know, mid 20th century solutions. You know, let's build a road because that might provide more infrastructure. I think we have to move beyond that, and that's what I'm hoping. If this process is going to be genuinely about building sustainable communities, that we will move beyond that. I must confess, and it's not intended to jar with what other people have said, but the term hard to reach is frankly, I don't think acceptable. I think what it denotes is that we have to adopt different approaches to reach people that have a vested interest, but, you know, frankly, the normal people that don't, you know, have a letter to whip off at the earliest opportunity. We have to do a little bit more, and I think that using that language denotes that we're kind of really going out of our way. Well, really, is it? You know, if we want to have people's views that don't just rock up ordinarily at consultations, then I think we need to work a little bit harder and not use that language because it's the wrong language. That's one comment. I remember being in this chamber when I suggested that the political support for removal of the tolls without any assessment of consequences, either intended or unintended, it's a political knee-jerk reaction, the removal of the tolls without any proper planning. And I certainly hope that we are going to see a real assessment which links up with some of the other debates we've had in this chamber about what does that actually mean for the region, because we don't have that. We don't know what it means, but I think it's just not confined to Chepstow. Seeing a lot of evidence of what that's going to look like in the communities I represent in Magar and Undy. We're seeing incredible changes in house prices, and they're not removed yet. So I think we have a real job of work to do, and I think it needs to talk to the LDP quite significantly. I'm also not sure about this business of not wanting to collaborate with the other authorities on it. I think we want to collaborate on some things, but not on others. And I think we've probably really got to get our heads around that if we really are interested in regional collaboration. No, you didn't, sorry. Are you, sorry, no, he didn't. Anyway, I think that the other point I wanted to make was that it says in here that, most of our policies seem to be working, and I note DES2, which is the one about amenity space, speaking from the point of view of a community that has very squeezed amenity space, and I know some others do. I've seen that because it wasn't suitable, it didn't fit, some of our amenity space be taken out so that we could potentially fit more houses. Well, okay, if we're going to do that, then where's the land going to come from to replace that? So I accept sometimes we need to do things to make things viable, but there has to be a quid pro quo, and I haven't seen that. So I'm only talking about one example, but I don't know if there have been others. But I think we do need to consider those, because sustainable communities they don't exist in a bubble either. So I think realistically, we're not going to arrive at a situation where we have this huge proportion of our population that live and work in the same place, don't have to go anywhere to go to work, that we're going to have workplaces in all of our communities. I think we have to be realistic about that, and that's one of the reasons I think we have to think about appropriate solutions to sustainability. So those are the things I'm interested in, and I have some scars. I attended the planning inspection when they came round to tell us we needed, I can't remember what they called it, to tell us we needed more housing, and that was horrifying. It was completely all house builders saying yes, clearly we do need more houses here. It didn't seem to me like a reasonable, iterative approach in the public interest, and I'd be concerned about having that happen again, because it didn't seem to take into account quite a lot of local factors. Thank you.
Councillor Richard John, and then we'll come back to Mark Hand.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wasn't going to speak in this debate, but I'm afraid I can't fail to respond to the comments of Councillor Watts about school funding. We remain committed, as we said in our corporate plan a couple of weeks ago. We remain committed to renewing all 4 secondary schools. And we were here 2 weeks ago talking about our budget, and we've committed to cash protection for schools this year. We've actually kept before school clubs open, which is not what's happening in a number of other local authorities. We're putting an additional £500,000 into the school system to be able to meet the Teachers' Pay Award, and we're putting £200,000 into IT investment in Chepstow. All measures which were opposed 2 weeks ago by the Labour Party. So I'd urge any members who are, when it comes to the challenges facing schools in Monmouthshire, I'd urge all members to work with us to help put pressure on the Labour government in Cardiff, which is still continuing. They're still persisting with these proposals to cut the Education Improvement Grant. And we all have concerns about the impact that's going to have on our youngest and our most vulnerable learners.
Thank you.
Chairman, I don't know what that had to do with the LDP. Why do you not interrupt?
Excuse me, I think
That
you were
was
just
nothing to do with the
answering
LDP.
the concerns of Councillor
But
Ross
what's that got to do with
about
Welsh Government and
infrastructure.
improvement grant? What's that
Thank
got-
you, thank you. Mark, would you like to wind up, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to comment on a couple of things that have been mentioned, and also hope to clarify what a short-term revision of the LDP would mean, just to make sure members are clear. In terms of a couple of points that Councillor Taylor made, I accept what you're saying about hard to reach and that terminology. It is taken from the Welsh Government regs, but we did actually have a bit of a discussion about this in Democratic Services Committee, and what we tried to word in a way that we hope is better in our report is seldom heard voices, which again isn't just a reflection on the voices. It's, you know, we have to work at reaching out to those people and hearing from them. Councillor Jones has made the point about the role of members in helping us do that, and we really would appreciate that support. But there are a lot of people out there that we don't hear from. We hope that that's because they're silently happy, but or thoroughly disengaged, which is not a desirable place for them to be. It is a challenge around the LDP. Members who went through the last process will recall we can have all these kind of high-level conversations at the start about growth and things. It's quite hard to get people involved or terribly interested in that. The risk is they become interested when it's a field next to their house. So quite how we ever quite bridge that, I don't know, but it is something we'd like to work with you at to do better. Councillor Taylor did say about collaboration. Just to clarify, we're not against collaboration. We're certainly not. We are recommending that we don't do a joint LDP with neighbours, but we do set out in the report that we would actually seek to work with, in particular, Torvine, who's going through a similar process to us, about 6 weeks behind. We would seek to do collaborative working with them. We can share evidence base, we can share some data, and we can work on some cross-boundary issues, you know, things such as if there is further development at Mam Highland, you know, it does affect us. We'll do some similar work with Newport and also looking east. So we're certainly not against collaboration, and also in terms of collaboration, the strategic development plan is absolutely that, but for that highest level work. So just to clarify, it's actually doing a joint plan that we're recommending against. Finally, Chair, there was a point made about again, without getting into the detail of whether growth in a particular place is good or bad, but just to clarify what a short form revision of the LDP would mean, it would mean sticking with the current plan strategy. We would have to look at population projections, household growth, economic aspirations. So there will be additional housing, no doubt. How much will be a discussion for yourselves. But we'll be looking at all of that up to about 2030, so that the plan has a 10-year lifespan on adoption, but based on the current strategy. So that would focus growth on Chepstow, Abergavenny, Monmouth, and then to a slightly lesser extent Sevenside. That is essentially the LDP strategy as we stand. So it would be more of that up to 2030 as a short-term revision, or a brand new plan. Let's just look at, you know, all of it in the round. What are the growth objectives? What are the economic growth aspirations for the county? The household needs, and how should it be done? It could be that the strategy is the same, that everyone concludes that is the right strategy for the next plan. But if we do a full revision, it lets us look at that in its entirety. Thank you, Chair.
Kelly Byrne would like to say a few words, then I'll ask Councillor Bob Greenland to put the recommendations.
Chair, I did have a question for, I was going to say Councillor Byrne now.
It can be.
I guess it was the house prices to earnings.
Madam Chairman, you've spoken once.
So earnings to house prices. I wanted what the average was now, because we've had data thrown at us. So, for example, in my ward, an average house price, 3-bedroom council house, is around about £190,000 to £200,000. What are the figures for Monmouth compared to the rest of Wales, and then also places like Bristol and London, so we can get an idea of how, you know, difficult the problem we are facing?
Why didn't you ask this when you had the chance
I'm
to
really
speak?
Sorry, and that's why I popped in at the final, because I just didn't forget.
Kelly will answer you.
All right.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I was going to highlight some of those issues because I do think it is a very important point. So data that we've had in the last couple of months that shows that over the last 12-month period, the average house price in Monmouthshire is now the highest in Wales as a whole. It's £307,000, which compares to a Wales average of about £186,000. So when you consider that median wages are between about £25,000 and £27,000, you can see there is a yawning gap. So entry-level houses, typically about £200,000, and I know in some areas we were looking at a house price to earnings ratio of about 11 times. So, you know, that is significant for us as a county, and it's a significant challenge. And we've particularly seen some spikes in Chepstow, about 8% increase over the past 12 months, but particularly in Sevenside, where we've seen nearly 15% in house price increases, which is even more significant. But I just wanted to talk about some of the issues related to sort of housing supply, because when we talk about affordable housing, the key thing is to understand the patterns of housing supply. And the difficulty we've had is with some of the strategic sites that have been allocated in the last plan actually coming forward. And I think we've discussed at length, you know, some of the reasons, many of which are out of our control, why some of these sites haven't come forward quickly enough. And I think, you know, and we've had this debate before in this chamber, you can have 30% affordable housing, you can have 40%, you can have 80% affordable housing. But 80% of zero is zero. So housing is a market intervention, it's particularly complex. So we've got to try and think of some of the other drivers and some of the policy tools that we can use to impact that. Just wanted to talk a little bit as well, if I can, about the economy, because I think that is something quite critical for us to think about in the context of a new plan. And as Mark said, you know, whether growth is something this council chooses to go for or not, I do think there are some important facts for us to understand. The economy enterprise is one of the 5 priorities you've agreed in your corporate plan. It's one of the 4 objectives in the wellbeing strategy. And we have commissioned some pretty important work to inform a new economic development strategy. And some of members here have been along to those sessions and engaged in the debate. But what that report is telling us, and it's only an interim report at this time, is that our population structure is not geared up towards strong economic growth. In fact, if we carry on the same trajectory, our growth in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, is negligible. Low rates of employment will continue in Monmouthshire because our population, our working age population, is ageing. As Mark has said, you know, the median is age 48. You know, which makes us really the highest in the whole of the Cardiff capital region. So unless we tackle some of the underpinning demographic and structural issues in our economy, the news for Monmouthshire is you won't grow. We won't grow more jobs, which could be a big factor when you consider high-end manufacturing, R&D intensive manufacturing in Monmouthshire is actually bucking some of the national trends. So we do have some important opportunities and potential to think about. But I think, you know, the outcome of that piece of research is clear. You know, if we do want radically different ends, it is going to take very different policy approaches. So there are some choices and opportunities for us to think about there. I think as well as housing, some of those recommendations are about how we attract new, younger, economically active demographic into the county, a choice of housing products, what different residential products do we need? Is it new settlement areas? Is it garden city developments, garden villages? Are they some of the things that we should be thinking about, as well as the densification of urban areas, which Mark has mentioned? But as we all know, you know, there are risks with growth as well. Sometimes growth strategies can exacerbate inequality. So we've got to think about, you know, some of the progressive social policies that will be important as well. And just finally, one of the things that I wanted to comment on, and it's to echo Mark's point really about the difference between a short form revision and a full revision. Now, if we go for a short form revision, we effectively tweak. Yes, we can add in more sites, we can get more housing numbers, but it doesn't fundamentally alter some of the problems that still remain to be solved. And I think in the context of the Cardiff capital region, because some others are ready to go now, they'll review their plans, they'll be ready when it comes to that strategic regional development plan. They'll allocate figures around housing numbers and population growth. They will translate then into housing completions, housing outcomes. And my suspicion is that, Monmouthshire's allocation, if you like, if we sit back and wait, would be fairly low. I think this gives us the opportunity to get on the front foot and to be in control of our own destiny. And, it's not for me to say what the outcome should be, clearly not. But I think this long-form, full revision will give us the data and the evidence to make the best informed decisions that we can for our county. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Greenland, would you like to remind us of the recommendations, please?
Yeah, if I could just say a few words in summing up, Madam Chair, first. I think that the question really that we're trying to answer here is, what do we want for a future Monmouthshire? And I'm sure we all want to see a strong economy, a vibrant county. And what is stopping us is the demographics that we're facing at the moment. We know that we've got an aging population, and we certainly need to try and change those demographics. We need to bring in more jobs into the county. We need businesses to come and set up here. And if we are to do that, then we need places for people to live. We need houses. We need to attract our younger people to come back and be part of this county when they have got their qualifications or whatever they're doing. So I've got no doubt that this LDP is the tool, a major tool, that will help us with this problem of democratics. I'm really pleased to see that we seem to have cross-party engagement here, and we agree that we have to go forward in this way. I also want to take on board the idea of having member engagement throughout the whole process, cross-party member engagement. We need to work on this together, and I just hope that when it comes to the really difficult parts, where it's actually saying where the houses are going to go, that we can still see the bigger picture. Now, of course, we need this affordable housing. We know the pressures that are there. But the only way we can deliver affordable housing is with market housing as well. And has been pointed out, if we put too high a percentage on that, then we are not going to get them come at all. We have got to be realistic, and yet we don't want the developers to be beating us down all the time and not delivering what we think should be there. And of course, we know that infrastructure is a problem. Yes, it is. It most certainly is a problem, and I think that it's more of a problem in the south of the county, where we're facing the issues from Gloucestershire, from the large amount of development just across the bridge from Chepstow, and of course for the bridge tolls. We need to control our destiny, and we can begin to do this by moving forward for a full LDP review, and I recommend that to Council.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Fox seconded, yes. All those in favour of the...
Sorry, Madam Chair, would you like me to read out the 4 recommendations in full?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
everybody be well reminded of it.
Okay, if I can find them again. Let's have a look. Here we are. The 2016 annual report recommended sorry, that's not the one. Let's try an iPad. That's much easier. The first one is that Council endorses the... I'm going to have to put glasses on now for this, it's too small. That Council endorses the review report for submission to the Welsh Government, that Council approves the commencement of a full revision of its local development plan, which would result in a brand new LDP for Monmouthshire for the period up to 2033, that Council endorses the draft delivery agreement, including community involvement scheme for the new LDP for a 4-week targeted consultation, and the 4th recommendation, that Council formally resolves to be part of the South East Wales Strategy Development Plan.
All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman. I do apologise. Yeah,
I wanted to abstain.
An abstention. Is it anybody else?
Thank you. Should we go straight on to the next one? Shouldn't we? Right. We now move on to item 3, the City Deal business plan, and I'll ask Councillor Fox to introduce this, please. Oh, hang on. Would you like to?
Thank you, Madam
wait
Chairman.
for the Chief Executive. I think he's coming to take over here.
I'll wait for Paul to join.
Yeah. Oh, well done. Oh, that's good. There we go. Seamless. Are you happy now? Very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, members. I'm really pleased to be able to be in this position to bring this report to this special council today. There's, the other 10 councils are considering this, not necessarily all today, but in this same time frame, because it's a really important report that we need full council, all full councils' approval on. And so today we're presenting the Joint Working Agreement Business Plan. That's what it's called, the JWA Business Plan, which is attached, and you'll all have no doubt had a look through that. The Joint Working Agreement, which we moved in March the 1st, 2017, requires that the 10 councils preside over one reserved matter. And a reserved matter is this Joint Working Agreement Business Plan. A very high-level business plan, and it needs all 10. Being a reserved matter requires all 10 councils to agree it to proceed. So it's really quite fundamental. And we were given 12 months to bring this plan forward. And whilst many may argue, well, it's taken a long time to come forward because the plan on the face of it doesn't look massive, it's very high level, but there's been a huge amount of conversations and a considerable journey on the way to get to this place. But we are in a place where 10 authorities, rather 10 leaders, believe that they have a business plan which their councils should be able to support. It might be just useful for me, Madam Chairman, just reminding members about the investment fund, the whole city deal, if you like. It was a £1.2 billion fund, the biggest city deal fund in the UK. However, 734 million of that is pre-allocated to Metro. So, and that £1.2 billion fund had three main players. It has the Wales Government, the 10 local authorities, and UK Government. The UK Government and the Wales Government contributing £500 million each, and local government contributing £120 million worth of capital into that bigger picture. So like I say, 734 million, 500 million from Wales Government, and the balance of that 734 from UK Government goes into Metro, leaving £495 million that the Cardiff Capital Region Cabinet will be focusing its attention on. You'll see that highlighted, broken down a little bit more in 381. One of the, and the bulk of that monies, of that £1.2 billion, will be capital monies. However, there is an element at the front which is revenue money from a UK government. Why is this so important as a reserved matter? Well, until we can dispense with this matter, until all councils have agreed, we cannot move forward as a region and draw down the local government contribution of £120 million, which is so important for us to take the next steps. And of course, as I shared earlier, this business plan, it's a requirement of the deal for it to be agreed. To date, we have invested, as you'll see in the report and you'll know from previous meetings here, £38.5 million to the first compound semiconductor project. And that was a fantastic, probably going to be, well, it is going to be global leading industry. And that's come to our region, which is a fantastic start and unlocks the potential of 2,000 jobs and is already moving along on target to drawing down the £380 million worth of private sector income, which we've driven through that investment. We invested that first £38 million, or first parts of that £38 million via revenue, which we had from UK government. By moving this plan and getting this plan through today, we can then substitute the revenue we spent on that process with capital, and we can retain the limited amount of revenue from more revenue-intensive projects as they emerge going forward. You'll see in the report and in the business plan that there are some indicative projects which we want to see move forward around the Metro Central project, around Regional Housing Investment Fund, a digital strategy and skills for the future projects. We, the Cabinet, have agreed that those in principle should be worked up and finance has been made available to enable those business plans to come forward. Yet the business plan will have to be fluid. It will have to recognise that other things will come along over the next few years and will need to and will no doubt want to fit within the plan. So there will be an annual business plan as well, but that won't be a reserved matter. It's just this 5-year business plan, overarching plan, which comes before all councils. It's worth just remembering also what that wider investment fund is supposed to do for our region, and what the expectations of projects, and that is to contribute toward 25,000 more jobs, to lever in inward investment of £4 billion or more, and raise GVA by 5%. And there's a very thorough assessment framework been put in place, which has been before this council and has been agreed, to make sure projects as they come forward hit those metrics. If they don't move and they don't hit those metrics, those projects will not be able to make progress. Madam Chairman, the finances are highlighted in the chart on 703, which are contained within the business plan. Just to remind members, we've agreed all this prior to in this chamber. Monmouthshire's contribution is 6.1% of the whole, and equates to around 7.37 million towards that whole package of the £120 million. However, so it's proportionate to population. As you'll see, Cardiff has a bigger contribution, 24%. However, we sit as equal partners. There are 10 leaders with an individual voice and an individual vote, and it's a strong unified group and very like-minded people, and we've built a strong relationship as a cabinet which can actually do things probably from a regional perspective above and beyond just City Deal. However, the focus is for us at the moment the City Deal, and every 5 years UK government will want to independently assess to see how we have managed to deliver against our priorities and the things which will be identified within the business plan. We have about 3 years to go before the first what they call a gateway review. I think it's 3 years, and officers will correct me if I'm wrong. So it's really important that we make progress. We need this plan moved and accepted by all councils to comply with the expectations of Deal. We need that to be done today. So, Madam Chairman, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions on the report itself, which I hope members have found really enlightening. It's a plan which has gone before other key consultees of the city region, the Economic Growth Partnership, another part of the governance structure which brings together business, HE, local government together to advise the Cabinet. It's been welcomed by them, it's been welcomed by other supporting groups which consultees to the city region Cabinet. You know, I think everybody has seen that this is a strong basis for us to move forward on. It's not restrictive. It gives opportunity for things to emerge and come forward. As I said, it needs to be fluid. So, Madam Chairman, the recommendations before us are as in 2, that the council approves the joint working approval. The council approves the joint working approval business plan. That's a. Yeah, I can say there's a misprint there. Sorry. So the joint working agreement business plan, as recommended by the regional cabinet for adoption as the formal JWA business plan. I'll move that, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Batruni.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. The Labour Group will support the recommendation. You know, the strategy, I've read it quite in detail, and we support its goals and the themes. I do have 2 particular points I wish to make, though, on the report more generally. One is, I know the leader talked about metrics there, and I don't remember ever seeing any. Maybe I missed it. But what I did read from the report, it says there is an assessment guidance on outputs and outcomes, but doesn't appear to be an appendix on there. So we don't seem to be able to actually look at those outcomes or outputs, which is, I think, really important. I'll say why that's really important. GVA. I'm really intrigued about or you can measure GVA, of course you can, but how do you discern that the city deal has added to the GVA on other factors, i.e. bridge toll reduction? Now, the bridge tolls and removals will have a massive effect on GVA, gross added value. So how do we know it wasn't the bridges and it was the city deal? How will the Treasury know? I'm just intrigued by that. And there's other things like, it says one of the goals, and it's a laudable goal, participation in the labour market for all members of society. Okay, how are we going to measure that? As far as I can see, there's no equality measure in terms of all members of society in Wales, let alone broken down by local authority, let alone broken down by region. So if you've come up with a model, great, can you send it to me? That'd be fantastic. The other point about jobs, the other point about measuring and jobs, is that jobs based in the region, or is that jobs just created, that people are employed, i.e. so we've got 25,000 more people employed, or is it actually jobs physically in the region? I'm presuming it's physically in the region, but I just want clarification on that. There seems to be a conflict in the strategy we're about to, I think we're about to accept, and housing. Now, we just had a heated discussion about housing and a disagreement about who's to blame or not. But here it says that all 10 local authorities will agree to work together on a strategic housing approach. And we've just voted a minute ago to say that we're going to go it alone and possibly link up to Torvine. And I think, I remember correct, and the leader corrects me if I'm wrong, I remember the leader saying that actually that was the sort of feeling amongst all 10 local authority leaders. So we've got a plan here where we're saying we're going to work strategically on housing, and then we're also going to go it alone as well. I'm a bit confused on that, and that doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever. The deputy leader talked about, just that we're going to accept a plan that sort of contradicts what we just sort of said. The deputy leader talked about the social demographics facing this county and that we have an older population. All of that is correct. And that we have, in particular in Monmouthshire, a shortfall of working age people. And that is directly linked to housing and affordability. They go elsewhere. They go to cheaper housing sites. And so for us to go alone and then not think strategically I don't know. I just need a bit more clarification on why we're going to do we're going to make vote on two contradictory statements around housing. Finally, and I've said this point before, and I think it's worth elaborating on the strategic business plan, which is all absolutely city deal based around Cardiff, based around our region, and I completely see the logic of that. But I'm really concerned in relation to Monmouthshire, in relation to Bristol. It's absolutely ignored. And for Monmouthshire to ignore that is, well, I'll say it, stupid. I think that's completely stupid. I know on point 7 it says improving connectivity globally, regionally and locally. Talks about the M4 corridor, talks about Cardiff Airport, not a single mention for Bristol, which has a massive amounts of working population in Monmouthshire. Go to Bristol. The buses are packed. The trains are overcrowded going to Bristol. I think the leader said he was, I think the words, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, disappointed that people had to go to Bristol or Reading or Swindon. I think were those your exact words. I'm not disappointed. That is the primary growth and primary employer of many people in Monmouthshire. And we have a regional plan that doesn't even talk about Bristol, which is, I can't fathom that personally. I noticed there's Metro Plus, one of the concrete suggestions for further growth, which again, correct me if I'm wrong, was a further £40 million into contribution towards improving the infrastructure of Cardiff train station. Nothing opposed to that, but we're improving Cardiff, and there's Metro Plus, and Metro starts in Cardiff and then takes years to reach out the rest of us. So Cardiff just gets a great deal. It contributes the most money, I get that, but Cardiff already is the most connected. Already there has the most jobs based locally for people. It's the outer regions, which include Monmouthshire, that struggle to get the connectivity, struggle to draw the investment, and they get all the money straight up front. And I know it's not tit for tat, but if we're about inclusive growth, which is just the primary motive for this, it can't all start in Cardiff. It already has the growth and the jobs and the connectivity. It's all the outlying regions that don't have that. So explain to me the rationale for that.
Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Fox, you'd like to answer that, please.
I'm disappointed, actually, Dimitri. I think you let yourself down, Ferris. You'll probably be one of the only politicians in South East Wales who thinks the city deal is lacking in many ways. First of all, you clearly did miss a meeting here where we had a key meeting. I can't remember the date. I'm sure that somebody will have the date, where we sat and we agreed a joint working agreement. We agreed the assessment framework. We agreed the financial business cases. Those areas were that the assessment.
Just to be clear, there was no metrics, though, was there?
Without reading it, I haven't.
There wasn't. Honestly, there was no metrics.
The assessment framework, officers will come in a minute and clarify that. The assessment framework has been approved by the Treasury, by Wales Government, and by the 10 authorities. That is in place and was agreed at this council. And it's a shame, actually, perhaps you hadn't got a little closer to it at that time. The 25,000 jobs is for the region. And I really do hope we can make massive steps toward closing that gap. And what I said earlier in the debate is, I want Monmouthshire young people to have the opportunity to have a good job close to Monmouthshire. I don't want them moving away to live in Swindon and Reading, other places like that. They want to stay. They want them to stay in Monmouthshire, to have a good opportunity local. Yes, we know Bristol's right across the water and very clearly a clear partner. The region, the city, the Cardiff Capital Region Capital Region Cabinet will be wanting to work very closely with the wider Southwest, and there is already the cities working closely together moving forward. Yes, very clearly we will in the future be working very closely with Bristol. Of course we will. We're currently trying to shape the city deal, the city region business plan as laid down before you today. Madam Chairman, I know that there will be officers here who will want to reflect on more on this. And I understand where Dimitri's coming from, where he sees something which he believes is just Cardiff-centric, and Cardiff getting 40 million. It's actually a £160 million project, which will have 40 from the deal, 40 from Wales Government and 40 from UK Government, and is seen as transformational for the region. It's seen as it will have a benefit to the wider region. What I've never been in this chamber and promised big shiny buildings or shiny things within Monmouthshire. We know the metro won't stretch into Monmouthshire in the same way as it will stretch up to the valleys. We know we'll see some of the growth of metro in the south east, but we'll see metro in different forms as it rolls out through Monmouthshire going forward. And it won't necessarily be trains. We know that. You're not going to see a new train track cut up to Monmouth. We know that. We'll see perhaps rapid bus transit. We'll see other multimodal sorts of things going forward. But I can't say exactly what that will look like. All I know is that we should be really strongly active as the gateway to Wales within the city region. We are fundamentally placed. We need to take advantage of that and be an influential player in the involvement of the region. That may not mean that fantastic things happen right on our doorstep with big shiny buildings, but we can facilitate opportunities like we've done with the IQE and the compound semiconductor wafer foundry in Newport. Because if we've through putting that investment in there, we've unlocked potentially 2,000 jobs in the compound semiconductor cluster, and many of the young people who live in Monmouthshire can get the £45,000 jobs here. So, it's going to mean different things for different people. We know that the region will, and we'll see different types of benefits rolled out as the years progress. And I can't foresee exactly all of those opportunities as yet, but we know there are going to be some really exciting areas of growth, and hopefully some of those will locate very close to us. But the reality is the region is 55 miles across and about 30 miles high, with half of the Welsh population. If we can create the opportunities within that region, it puts it in easy reach for our people to stay in the region, live and grow and bring their families up, and at the same time raise the aspirations in those families in the regions where sadly your government has let Wales down time and time again. Only now, coming through, working together as a region, are we starting to make steps toward addressing the shortcomings that your government have done. Sorry, they've done it again and again and again. They've not managed to do stuff. And it's only through UK government driving forward a devolution package, which we've embraced as a city deal, as a group of local authorities in city deal, dragging Wales government to the table. That's what's brought the change, which is going to shape the future economy of South East Wales. So I'm disappointed you're so negative about this, but I'm sure officers will be able to address some of the fundamental points around metrics and assessment.
Before I bring the Chief Executive in, I'll just take the few people that have asked to speak here. Councillor Watts.
Yeah, it is the UK government. If you talk about, kind of going forward, this is a UK government that introduced an ideological austerity programme across the UK. And it is ideologically driven, because when you compare it to the other European countries, and allow me to say this, they have disproportionately more debt than we do. There was never any need. So let's never, ever forget that. They've impoverished the people of this country and made the poorer poorer. However, what I would say is your example of IQE is a really, really good one. Well, we can't rely exclusively on that, and we want to see more of that, Peter. But to do so, you have to understand that that part of the economy is part of the Severn-side economy. And Dimitri's absolutely right to draw your attention to Bristol. Yeah, because all those jobs are tech jobs, the financial industries, or those that cross over into both. Those are the growth industries. You're ignoring that, and you live in the south, Peter. You represent many of those people that commute over or work at home, that work directly and feed their families from those houses. To ignore that is disgraceful.
Madam Chairman, I've got to respond to that.
No,
I've got to respond to that.
Let me
Mr.
respond.
Chairman, it's not disgraceful. We absolutely recognise that the opportunities in Bristol. Absolutely. There are many people. There are many people who work there. But shouldn't we also be looking to drive our own region as well and creating massive opportunities here, which can actually encourage people from Bristol to come and work over in Monmouthshire and the Cardiff Capital Region? Why can't we be globally known for something? Why do you always want to divest what could be good here to somewhere else? I know you live in England, but you shouldn't constantly. You should think a bit about Monmouthshire.
No, that's enough. There are other people want to speak, please. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think things like the Cardiff City deal and so forth are very good in terms of improving the economy and looking for jobs. And I do think that we also ought to look at the opportunities that are arising as a result of the tolls going down. And I would very much like to see the other end of the area in Wales looked at as well, so that we have a Gateway to Wales project which is sponsored by the Welsh Government and also the English Government, so that we've actually got because obviously the local authorities may lack the resources to look at things like economic development, about employment sites and so forth. And I very much hope that that is a vision that is taken forward, so that we actually do see economic development coming from both sides of Wales. And obviously that's an aspiration. So I just wanted to say that, but also so that we'd have people to also look at the infrastructure requirements as a result of the Severn Bridge tolls going as well, because we do want to make sure that we've got those economic opportunities for our young people, and that those economic opportunities can be available actually at our doorstep, which is basically as a result of the tolls going, and some of the industry and businesses from the southwest looking at this region in a positive way, so that we'll actually have people both living and working in the same area. Thank you.
Councillor Alan Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think there's a printing error on section 7.01. It says, I'll have to take my glasses off of this will comprise Metro Scheme 503 million Welsh Government, 106 million from the European Development Fund and 125,000 from the UK Government. So I think that's a printing error. I think that should be million. So I do read it. Can I just say that I think it's a remarkable achievement to get 10 local authorities working together on anything. And having read this document extensively, what I see is opportunity. Not only opportunity for the region, but opportunity for Monmouthshire. And I'm going to go back to the days when I was a young manager, which is a long time ago now. But I attended a meeting with the works manager, and he just happened to have some money available. And he said to the managers around the table, right, I've got this money available, who's got schemes that they need to put forward with a payback? And all the managers looked at each other, apart from one who drew out a file full of projects for the money to be allocated to. And that stuck in my mind, and I learned a lot from that experience. So my question really is, perhaps to Peter or to the Chief Executive, is, whilst this is a regional scheme, there are opportunities for Monmouthshire to take advantage of certain things within it. We need to develop a strategy to do that. Are we already doing that? Or what is your proposal for doing that? So we put ourselves ahead of the curve and we're in the right position to get the best deal we can for the people of Monmouthshire. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's you just now. Councillor Paul Pavier, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I firstly thank the leader for bringing this important JWA business plan to us. Can I thank him for the words of comfort as well in relation to collaboration with Bristol, Gloucester and the South West. I did have concerns initially that we, as part of the 10, were potentially just facing inward and looking at the South Wales and this area around Newport and Cardiff, to the detriment of losing collaboration with Bristol. But I think you've given us a lot of, as I said, a lot of comfort, a lot of good words about how we not just develop ourselves as the gateway to Wales, but we become the linchpin between the city region and Bristol and the southwest, which is really important. So I've got just a few questions. In terms of risk, what would happen if one or more of the authorities were not able to make their annual contribution? In terms of gateway review, what are the expectations of procuring the review? Will this be done once for all the stages, or will there be separate tenders for each of the reviews, which would mean potentially different companies doing that process each time? What about scrutiny arrangements within each local authority? What mechanisms are going to be put in place to allow us to periodically scrutinise the performance of the regional cabinet and the activities? And again, in terms of risk, what happens if the Gateway Review Assessment deems that progress has not been made? What happens to UK government funding, and what potential pressures would that bring then on our budgets in terms of borrowing costs and obviously the wider workings of the region? Thank you.
Councillor Giles Howard.
Thank you. I sort of support the report, and a question is about the Metro, and I think whatever we think of the LDP, how good or bad it is, in the period it's going to run, it's not going to bring jobs to doorsteps, and people are going to be reliant on either their own transport or public transport. And I was a little bit concerned to read a fortnight ago of Mick Antonew's comments where he likened the Metro to the Loch Ness Monster, and everybody knows what it is but had never seen it. And I think, okay, I get the rebuttal from the ministers there about the tender's going to be let in May, and what I would ask the leader is whether or not he'd be able to arrange for some kind of presentation to members to give us an update on how that's going to look, please.
Chief Executive will speak now.
I'll try and pick off some of the points that members have made, if that's okay, without choking myself. Probably there's another point which is, I think, more important than any other, which is to recognise why this is here today. As a council, you've already given significant delegated powers to the leader to act on your behalf as a member of the Joint Cabinet. You as a sovereign body are being asked to consider this business plan today, and it's an attempt to recognise that you're not gifting all of your powers away to a regional undertaking, 10 councils, 10 sets of decision makers, and if there is anybody in the room that has got a particular interest in sort of seeing the development of the Cardiff Capital Region City deal turned off, this is a great opportunity to do it, because if you say no today, then I think the city deal is in significant strife. So you know, the interplay between local democracy, you, and the powers that you voted already to give to your leader is an important point, I think, to reflect on. To try and pick up as many of the points that I can as quickly as I can. Councillor Petruni, a whole set of really interesting points. You started off with reference to how do you measure causality on GVA. HM Treasury have understood now that you can't do that. It's a guessing game. I think the original city deals UK-wide were largely predicated on being able to demonstrate causality on GVA uplift. The gateway review process is moving away from that, because I don't think there's an economist anywhere in the world that's managed to actually come up with that model yet, so I don't think we're going to invent it locally. The first 5-year gateway for the Cardiff Capital Region City deal will actually be based more on project delivery than outcome. That might sound a little bit strange, so I guess I'd recast it for you by reminding you that this is a 20-year programme. The outcome is expected to be delivered over 2 decades, and HMT, Treasury, are content to see projects going through our assurance framework and being delivered in the first 5 years, so they're looking for traction. They don't want to see a whole set of delivery in years 16, 17 or 18, because that's going to achieve nothing. They want to see progress. Part of your interplay between Councillor Fox, Councillor Petruni, large I think Councillor Fox's input was about recognising that the first investment out of the door, IQE, I won't reference it again, compound semiconductors, and because of the speed that we had to move it on, we had to take advantage of revenue contributions from Treasury to make that happen into what's innately a capital project. If we agree and our partner councils agree this business plan over the course of the next few days, we will look to substitute capital for that revenue, so we can use revenue for a very specific set of programmes which Monmouthshire should be looking to explicitly benefit from, and they will be skills-based programmes. Skilled-based programmes, be it apprenticeships, be it degrees, be it whatever, they're revenue in their orientation. So agreeing this today will give us some latitude to enter that territory, and it's a territory I know that members will be very interested in, as am I. So hopefully that sort of gives a bit of colour to that. There are metrics, there aren't sways of them, but I will dig them out for you. The two core metrics that the programme talks to are 25,000 new high-value jobs in the region, and the ability for £495 million of uncommitted funding to attract £4 billion of third-party funding. I won't say commercial or private sector, I'll say £4 billion third-party. And I say that deliberately. And with an example, we should be interested in our £495 million, enabling us to access the £4 billion that's been declared over the course of the last few months around the industrial strategy, the industrial challenge funding that's been declared at a whole UK level. So we need to explore how we leverage and we achieve gearing. But to give you a sense of what the assurance framework, I guess the process that determines whether a programme passes muster or not, for £500 million, £500 million to round it up, to achieve £4 billion, you get really quickly quite a sense of the leverage. You know, you're looking about 8 to 1. So that's going to mean it's going to take a raft of really quite good programmes to achieve that. If I can sidestep the sort of the political part of Bristol or etc., the rational part of me says, let's remember we've been into this for 2 years. I think it is an achievement to have the 10 councils in South East Wales working in a way that perhaps I've never experienced in my career before. There are conversations taking place with Mayor Rees. Indeed, there was a seminar down at the Celtic Manor about 4 or 6 weeks ago, which was just about equally made up of people from the English side of the bridge and the Welsh side of the bridge, and the terminology of seven side is starting to take hold. I actually think that's healthy. I think if again we remind ourselves that this is a 10 to 20 year programme, wouldn't it be good if in a decade's time we're talking about Swindon to Swansea? Because that starts to talk about a cluster, but for the purposes of today, you're talking about a 5-year business plan. You're not talking about the second or the third tranche. And if we can achieve what's in this first business plan over the course of the next couple of years, we'd have created a good start. But I do observe the politics, and I do see that, no, not here, the politics of the UK, and indeed the politics of the South West. And there is a desire on both sides of the water to start to sort of have a more plural, inclusive conversation, because there is an absolute recognition that people don't just commute from Monmouthshire to our west. They go east. They also go north. There's a bit of water to go south, but we do have quite significant outflows every morning, not only to Swindon but to Birmingham. Some go as far as Manchester. So actually, that sort of understanding of our place within a region, I think, is something that I think you touched on in your earlier item, actually. And with the tolls coming down, our place is a logistical sort of, really interesting space. I think that's something for us to explore going forward. So it's not writ large in the first 5-year business plan, but I suspect it will be in the second, and the work is starting. So hopefully that at least gives you some comfort. In terms of the Metro Central point, because let's just be clear, yes, first investment out of the door was about compound semis, based in just outside Newport, but pretty much based quite centrally for pretty much anyone, actually, living or working in the region. The second investment isn't quite out of the door. It's an investment in principle into something called Metro Central, which would see a significant uplift in the 2 train stations in Cardiff, Central and Queen Street. There aren't too many people most people get, where's the busiest train station in Wales? Most people get it's Cardiff Central. And if any of you use it, it ain't the greatest experience, is it, as you go into a young, vibrant capital city. The second busiest train station in Wales is Queen Street, actually, which is also in Cardiff, and it's where the Valleys lines tend to enter Cardiff. So that investment is, yes, it's physically located in Cardiff. Yes, it opens up the more fundamental regeneration of the Brains site and other places, which are quite important. But it also opens up, in a more organised way, the ability for the Valleys communities to enter and to leave Cardiff, and hopefully, in time, people to leave Cardiff and go north as well, because this city deal isn't about sort of an exodus one way. It's about creating a richer environment across a whole set of communities. And I guess I don't need to remind you, but I'll do it anyway. Certainly, Councillor Fox is always very, very clear in joint cabinets that this isn't about Cardiff and the Valleys. It's about the coastline, it's about the rural communities, it's about the valley communities, it's about the cities, it's about the towns, it's about the villages. That's the way that the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal has been constructed. I don't think there is necessarily a dichotomy between the positions on housing, and I'll explain why. The 10 leaders have been clear that they're willing to work together to develop a strategic development plan. I think Mark earlier referenced that. But whether we're all yet in a position to, given time constraints and different positions on LDPs, and I think we all share anxieties about being in a position not having an LDP. I have to say it's particularly an issue for a place like ours, because, you know, we don't lack people that want to put houses down here. They just don't want to do it on terms that we would like to see. There are other civic areas in the Cardiff Capital Region that would give their right arm for a house builder. So we have to remember that we don't have, it's not vanilla. You know, a very, very different set of circumstances. If the SDP, the Strategic Development Plan, builds out well and plays out well, this may well be the last time you ever do an LDP. You know, I think that's the way that I would see it. I think we could well be at a point of transition. You know, whether that's the way it plays out will be dependent on people like you and those that follow you over the course of the next political cycle or two. But we are the Joint Cabinet does create the platform to see LDPs replaced by one SDP, but I would suggest not on this cycle. I think the LDPs are just in different positions, and that's just the way it is right now. I've mentioned, my last point in terms of the wider regional dynamics, so the Swindons through your Bath, through your Bristols. Let's please remember that we're only talking about £495 million over 20 years. You know, I'd rather have it than not have it. But actually, I think we previously said in this chamber, we should see it as material, but it's not fundamental. What's fundamental is the relationships that we can build off it. So I'm absolutely with you there, and I suspect the whole Joint Cabinet would be. So I think we can work that one through. Councillor Davis, Monmouthshire opportunities. Going to have to think hard on that. You know, I think it's a very sensible chamber as far as I'm concerned. We're not anticipating the second shard to be built in Caldicot. I think as a response to the city deal, but we should be very interested in the human opportunities that accrue from this programme. We're blessed in having bright, able people. I was going to say young people, but it's bigger than that. We're blessed in having bright, able people in our space, and we should be interested in adding £10,000 and £15,000 net disposable income to people's salaries. I think that's where we're going to have to hunt. There'll be some train benefits, there'll be some metro benefits, but the metro benefits I think will be more about fast bus than they will be about sort of creating tracks that don't already exist. We should be hopeful about Seven Tunnel Junction. We should be hopeful about Mega Walk Up. We should be hopeful about generating a conversation about Chepstow to Bristol on the train. We should be hopeful about all of those things, and I think we can try and positively position them. I think somebody referenced earlier, it might have been in your introduction, Leader, there's a housing investment fund that we're starting to look at. Do you know what? I don't think we will be big beneficiaries of that, because that's a personal view, And largely the way that that's being thought of right now is how do you create financial instruments that open up tracts of land in other civic areas that developers won't touch. And it's not grants, it might be soft loans and things of that nature. What really interests me is how do we start to regenerate an industry based on SME builders? Because we don't have a lot of them in the Cardiff Capital Region anymore. We tend to think about large volume builders. Maybe there'll always be a place for that part of the market, but if you want profit and wealth to stay in your region, I would suggest to you that the way to do it is actually to look a little bit further down the supply chain. With a 20-year model here, we have the time to rebuild a part of industry that actually Monmouthshire used to be very rich in, relative to some other spaces. We have companies like Edenstone based here now and starting to punch well above their weight. So I'm interested in that. You know, I'm interested in the whole apprenticeship route that can come behind that. And I think that has some significant possibility for us. Councillor Pavia, the Gateway Review, we won't be commissioning that locally. It'll be national. It'll be done at a UK level. So however that works through, whoever the individuals that are involved in that, they'll be distant from us, as I think they should be, because there'll be a check and a balance. No council can withhold their contribution. You can't withhold yours because you've agreed it. So effectively, you've already struck a contract. If a council goes bust, I think there'll be bigger issues to be worrying about than how we're going to make good their financial contribution to the city deal. But all 10 councils have actually taken the view that they can afford their relative contribution, and 10 sovereign bodies have committed to that. So I think we can stand pretty good on that. But it is a big issue, you know, if we don't make the progress that we've committed to. So Gateway 1 at the end of year 5, not a particular issue, I would suggest. As long as the projects are being delivered, it's not about their contribution at that point in time, it's about traction. By the second Gateway, year 10, if we're not starting to see tax yield, if we're not starting to see employment, then I think we should travel with the belief that HMT may say you're not honouring your side of the bargain. So guess what? The money stops. So it's a good reminder, I think, as a discipline. This is not a grant programme. It's a deal programme. So whenever or if we do encounter pet projects coming forward, I'll take you back. 500 million's got to generate 4 billion. So if somebody asks for £50 million and it's going to generate £50 million and a penny, it's not going to cut the mustard. And I think that gives us a sense of the scale and the size of project or programme that we need to be able to package together. But if we fail to achieve on Gateway 2, the bad news is that we as a council will continue to feel the penalty of that for the next 30 or 40 years, because the income flow that we're expecting will be turned off. And I would suggest to you that a large part of the cost stream will still be there. So people like you should always have an interest in that core metric. 500 million, 4 billion, 25,000 jobs. If those two aren't being honoured, then Houston, we may well have a problem in the future, and I'd rather not be there. I hope I've covered most of the ground, and I think, Leader, that would be a pretty accurate summation of what most I'd hope the 10 chief executives would say in the 10 civic areas.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Would you like to return to the recommendation, or do you want to sum up first?
Well, I'm not sure if anybody else wants to say anything. So thank you, Paul, for covering some of those issues. Giles asked if we could have perhaps a presentation of what Metro might look like, and I think that's something we should be able to facilitate, and I'm sure we can set that up. I think it'd be interesting for all of us to catch up on progress of where the Metro is moving forward. Relating to Alan's point also, it's worth noting, you would have picked it up, that Caldecott is a strategic hub, recognised as a strategic hub, you know, and there's several of those across the region. You know, when we talk of compound semiconductor cluster, we've already got a key partner in Portskewitt, Microsemi. We have partners right across the region. The advancements we're making in that area will set this region as the global lead. You know, I mean, that's something significant in it, global lead. if the City Region Cabinet and the officers who worked so hard hadn't have done what they did back last May, right, that opportunity would be lost and be sited in North America. That's the importance of this region. And while we can knock about little points, you know, the big picture is what is important. And, you know, we shouldn't really get too bogged down in what's Monmouth going to get out of this, what's Cardiff going to get out, what's Blaenau Gwent got to get out. We've moved away from that mentality. We're already in a regional approach. Because if the region does well, we all do well. And that's the key message I want to share. So, Madam Chairman, I think the recommendation, I read it out earlier, it's a straightforward one-liner. I'll just scroll back to that. So, recommendation is that the Council approves the joint working agreement business plan as recommended by the Regional Cabinet for adoption as the formal JWA business plan.
Thank you. And it was seconded by Councillor Matt Feekins. All those in favour, please raise.
I think that's unanimous, Chairman. That's carried.
Thank you very much. That concludes our business for today. Thank you very much for attending.